All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of the Call Up Podcast. As always, I am your host, Kenny, and today I have the pleasure of talking to Matt Carlo, professional wrestler slash figure collector. What's going on, Matt? How's it going?
Not much, man. I appreciate you having me on. Want to thank you for having me on your show. Checked out a couple episodes out there, so really excited to be on, man.
Yeah. I'm glad that you got on. I was looking over your resume, and you've been in the business for 13 years now.
Yeah. 13 years, mostly independents, like all in the Bay Area. Everyone says it's kind of like an island out there, so it's kind of hard to break out. But yeah, mostly Bay Area. A lot of like all pro wrestling is where I got trained. That's the
Mhm.
camp that was featured in Beyond the Mat,
Uh-huh.
that documentary. So I was trained there and then wrestled there for a little bit. I wrestled at in LA with Rikishi's school, Knox Pro for a little bit. Couple here and there's along the West Coast, a little bit in Reno, and then majority of what I've been doing for the past few years has been a hood slam in Oakland,
Okay.
which is more of like a punk rock variety kind of bar show kind of feel.
Oh, nice. Are they still putting on shows now? I know with the whole pandemic, a lot of shows got put on hold, and I'm starting to see a lot of other promotions like slowly but surely getting back into doing they're like streaming shows online where they have maybe like one or two people in the crowd, but you could view it online on certain websites.
hmm Well, I know that the Hood Slam brand is definitely still doing things on their websites, on their Twitch. You can find them on Twitch there. Um, so they kind of do like stuff like student shows or like training shows or some kind of content will be on there. Sometimes it's like skits too. Some
Right.
other things are like promos. Some of the guys are cutting. So there's a lot of things like that floating out there. As far as shows here on the West Coast, like I know there are a lot of shows popping off here and there, like throughout the nation, but like still here on the West Coast, it's been bone dry. I want to
Wow.
say the last booking I had was for like March 16th of last year, 2020.
Wow. Right.
And that was right before lockdown and right before everything shut down. Um, and we used to run like monthly and almost in 2020 and 2019 we were running like weekly in Hood Slam for Oakland. So these were shows where we're drawing a bunch of people every week, crowds and crowds of people coming in, word of mouth being spread. But then all of a sudden we just got cut short, and it's not like we can like we had everybody up to the ring, like everybody was like a very crowd party atmosphere, so it's
Mhm.
kind of hard to envision that in a COVID era. I know that they will adapt when it comes time, but like I said, on here on the West Coast I haven't really seen much of anything pop off. Maybe a couple things in Oregon, but not too much on the West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully soon, you guys will start getting some more shows in. I know, like, it's been like pockets of different states that's been doing shows. I know here in New York, we haven't had any shows at all. I know out like in Jersey and like PA, like they started to do shows, but like here for the most part, like we're bone dry as well as
Yeah.
far as getting like indie shows. And I used to love going to like indie shows all the time, and we used to get like three, four of them a week, in a weekend.
hmm
And that pretty much will take up your whole weekend. Where you'd be like, okay, what am I doing Saturday? Like I'm gonna go to a GCW show out in Jersey, and then you have another one popping off like in Brooklyn. So yeah, I mean this COVID era really shut a lot of stuff down. So I'm hoping, you know, as the year goes on, we can slowly but surely get back to it. You know.
Yeah, totally. Me too. Like on the wrestler side of it, it was like it was sometimes it was a Friday double shot and then another
Right.
Saturday and then drive to another town on Sunday. And like before I was almost like complaining like, oh man, we have all this stuff to do. But like it's like almost you wish you knew you were in the good times when you were in the good times, because now it's like there's no shows. So
Mm-hmm.
you almost kind of take it for granted a little bit.
Yeah. So let me ask you, because I know a lot of us, being like wrestling fans and stuff like that, and then being a fan, but also being, a talent in this industry. So like, when did you fall in love with wrestling?
Uh, So it gets real fishy. I'm like one of those kids. I know it's like really not cool to say it now, but it's like one of those kids who always like had wrestling in their life, like thinking
Hmm.
about it. Like if I'm thinking about anything in particular, like I remember my mom having a rented VHS of the Ultimate Warrior Hulk Hogan match at WrestleMania 6. Like so I could definitely recall seeing that. Like I remember seeing like the Rockers. So it was like very early 90s, like late, I was born in 87, so like I remember catching that stuff. So maybe it was on like a rented VHS, but
Hmm.
I just the colors, the action, the whatever it was, the atmosphere, it just caught my eye and kind of fell in love with wrestling from that point. Um, and pretty much just stuck with me all my life, whether it was through, uh, you know, just flipping channels every Saturday morning, trying to find wherever wrestling was, or stumbling across it. I was always trying to find it because it wasn't as easy as it is now to just turn on your phone and find tons and tons of wrestling.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Because I mean, back then you would have to like, it would be like Saturday, like afternoons or like early Saturday mornings, that they'll show some things. I remember like me, being a kid, they used to show like WWF at like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something like that.
mm,
And like I would watch it with my grandmother, what I mean? Because she's the one who really got me into wrestling. And then she kind of like
yep.
ventured off and was like, oh, I'm not gonna watch this no more. But then I stuck to it. Um, and then I started doing like other stuff. I don't know, like if you did it, where, like we do like the whole backyard wrestling stuff with like with your friends, and then you kind of like start seeing, as you get older, you're like, oh, you want to do the same things that they're doing, and then you probably want to like venture off and like go to a school, which I'm assuming that's what you did. Like down the line, you decided like, hey, like this is something that I want to make a career out of. Let me find a school and actually do this like legit.
Yeah, for sure. So like, yeah, growing up, I always like when I was youngest, I knew like WWF for sure. And like it wasn't even until maybe 95 where I found out about WCW. So
Mm-hmm.
like I was kind of a late bloomer in that sense. But then caught on to there. And then that's pretty much what it was. I found out about ECW through my friends who had like pay-per-view tapes and stuff like that. And and in that time it was like going over your friend's house, you'd play wrestling games on the 64, or like you'd watch the videos and you'd roughhouse a little bit, but it's not like I never did like backyard wrestling. Like
Mm-hmm.
I, don't get me wrong, there are weird things I did, like I'd go to playgrounds and like jump off of things pretending it's the top rope or the top of a cage or a ladder or stuff like that, but
Right.
I never really did like physical with anybody else backyard wrestling, because really like around my where I grew up, or it was a lot harder to find people who actually liked wrestling,
Right.
um, which is kind of flows into how I found out about like indie wrestling, and
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't even know that was going on. Like I didn't even go to my first live wrestling show till I was like 17. Um, uh, so I was just like wearing a wrestling shirt or something like that, and one of the local wrestlers out here, Wild Storm, was working at one of the local restaurants, and he was saying, "Hey, you like wrestling? You should come to this indie show." I was like, "What's an indie show?" But it turned out I was wearing like a Hardy Boys or something, and Jeff Hardy was going to be there. So
Mm,
easy, easy hook. Like, sure, I'll go.
exactly.
uh, and then I checked it out, and to be that up close, because I, before my first indie shows, I did go to like a live local show for WWE, and you're kind of far away. You kind of really
Right.
understand the difference between seeing it on TV and seeing it live, at first anyway. But then being at an indie show, like you were saying earlier, it's like there's nothing else like it, because there's like full creative, full um, people putting themselves out there, and uh, that's what kind of caught my eye. And like to know that there's this whole world I see as wrestling in WWE and WCW, and knowing that it's here local in my area, like it just blew my mind. So of course I did eventually find a local school, and I visited a couple schools that were around here at the time. A couple of them closed, a couple of them I didn't feel was a good fit, but eventually found All Pro Wrestling, and um, through the documentary and through like the wrestlers they were having come through at the time, Christopher Daniels, Brian Kendrick, which was a big one for me. AJ Styles came through, a bunch of different guys, and then the guys who came from this school like Spike Dudley and Crash Holly and Mike Modest, Donovan Morgan. Like at the time when I was growing up, like in indie wrestling, like those were the guys to look forward, like to look as like kind of like indie heroes, and I still do to this day. um so to know that they all flowed through there or touched base in there at least for some amount of time, I kind of figured that'd be the best place to go to. So I hit up Roland Alexander, who's passed away since, but he's always good to me, and always did me right. So I know there a lot of other people have um, different stories, but for the later part of when I came into APW, because it was like the later half right before they closed, it was a great time for me.
Yeah, you always get those stories. Like everybody always says, like there's always like two sides to the story. So I definitely could, understand when they're, you probably get like a good side and a bad side, but like, it's like your experience. So then exactly like, what to expect. So, once you started doing like the training and everything, you fell in love even more. I know for me, going to indie shows is what made me fall in love with wrestling even more, because I was the same way where like I would go to WWE shows like with my mom, and then you'll see it from far. And then when I started getting older and I went to indie shows and I started to see it up close, is where like I really fell in love with it. And I said to myself, like, I want to go to a school. And I did it for a little while. And then I kind of was just like, all right, I don't want to do this no more. Like, but for you, like it, once you started training, it clicked for you even more, where you said like, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do with my life.
Yeah. Like, I guess like you hear a lot, like people say like, but it's just like, I didn't really super make it to WWE or anything, but people say like they always vision themselves doing it, and always like that was me. Like same way. I always vision myself doing it, being in there, like wrestling technical. I knew I wasn't the biggest guy, so I thought like the style I brought was like kind of different, of trying to avoid and mislead and kind of take advantage of different points. But yeah, it's something I always wanted to do, always wanted to be a part of, and luckily I was met good people along the way. But yeah, sorry, I might have lost point of what the question
No,
was.
no, that's okay. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, as far as like training is concerned, you've been training for like,
Yeah.
been in the business for like a good number of years. So, like now with the whole like pandemic stuff that we're going through, and then with newer companies, popping up besides like WWE and like NXT, like, it's great that you're still getting your name out there and just like, getting seen, because now like all these other companies are out there where they can pick you up and you can have like a bigger name and not necessarily have to focus like your whole attention to WWE.
For certain. Like, and I love it too, because like I said, growing up, I was always a WWE guy, younger, but like once I found out about all the alternatives to WWE, I still love WWE, but seeing all the other alternatives really turned me on to like, I was always like a WCW guy, because like, yeah, this is great, but here's also what we have over here. So I always thought that was good. And just like AEW is now, with being that contrast and with all the intertwinings of like all the different companies they're doing, it's like, it's no wonder they're like, they got Will Hobbs signed, they got, Thunder Rosa signed, they got all the people, Brian Cage, all these West Coast cats being cherry picked out of here. So I'm happy for everybody.
It's great that there's more eyes out there for for talent to get recognized for, and I'm starting to see a lot more independent artist talent getting signed to like more and more deals. So I'm definitely hoping that you're one of those names and you're still grinding out there once this whole pandemic stuff finishes, and we can get back to like going back to shows and like getting more people out there and stuff like that. But also, when I met you was through the Chick Foley Facebook page.
Hmm.
So then you're a collector as well, as you can see in the background when people watch
Yeah.
the video. So like, what exactly do you collect?
Well, uh, I'm kind of like one of those basic like childhood collectors. So basically, I have all the stuff I had growing up as a kid, like some of the loose Hasbro's. Not a completist at all because, like, I think that's just too much for me anyway. But like, I have my old Hasbro's. I have my old Bone Crunchers. I've got a couple random like WCW, San Francisco toy makers. But like as of currently right now collecting, I'm pretty keeping up with the AEW Unrivaled brand.
Hmm.
I think just for right now and collecting, I think it's a good one for anyone to get into if you got those first few sets, just because like to start over from one is like a good accomplishment. Like it seems more realistic than like I love the Mattel Elite brand, but to
Okay.
go back from one and start from there, it's like almost impossible.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
it's a pain in the ass.
yeah, like, but don't get me wrong, I will cherry pick a few of them. Like, I got
Hmm.
Ryan Kendrick, the ringside exclusive for sure. I had to get that one out of the elites, and so I basically just cherry pick random ones, or a certain match type. I like the Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio Phantom style. I kind of like to
Hmm.
get a little bit of those. Um, when retros were around, I was really into retros. Um, but yeah, basically just going through AEW stuff, and also one of the ones I'm currently collecting is like a popular one that like wrestler collectors do is like the wrestlers I've wrestled shelf.
Right.
So I got a good load of people up in my Hasbro ring up there already. So I'm kind of slowly building all those guys up in there, and girls like for people I've done programs with or whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm one of those collectors too, where like, I collect like things that I grew up with,
Yeah.
so like, so my collection is just like all over the place. So I have like wrestling stuff, I have um you know Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I have GI
Mm.
Joes, I have Power Rangers, and in the beginning when I started to collect a lot of these things, it was more like, oh, I need to get a full set of something, you know and then now, as I guess now, since I've been doing a lot more of these interviews and talking to like other collectors, I kind of like change the way I collect things. So like, I'll go for stuff that I know I grew up playing with as a kid, and like the newer stuff that we get now from like, say, like Mattel with their elites. I kind of just like pick and choose
Mhm.
what I want, because before I used to just be a completist. I was like, oh, I'll go to ringside. I'm like, let me get the whole entire set of this, and then I kind of look at the set now, and I'm like, do I really need to get like, do I really need to get this one, or do I really need another Kevin Owens, or AJ Styles, Elite? And I kind of, so now I kind of like pick and choose, what I want. And like for me, like you have the people that you work with shelf. I haven't worked with anybody, but for me, what I've done now through speaking to like other people is I started to collect a lot of like ring gear. So like people that like I really like, and I'm like really big fans of theirs, I would reach out to them and see if I could try and get like gear from them and like just collect it. So when I do have like a room to display everything, I can pretty much like display them like, bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could display them like the way you see it like in a museum, like in a frame, or maybe put them like on a mannequin, and then just like keep them like in a room with like all my other like wrestling stuff.
I think that's super cool because like for me growing up, like the one thing I always wanted was like I think any kid growing up in like the 90s was like the Brett shades, Like
Yes.
always like, oh, if I could just go to the show, if you could just pick me out of everybody,
Uh-huh.
you always wanted. So if you're going ring gear, I think that's an awesome
Right.
kind of route to go. I would because I seen like some of your collection, and I've seen like you've got a lot of belts too, and that's the
Yes.
thing I'm really starting to like get itchy for, just like
Oh my
real
God.
belts.
Yeah.
And over here on the West Coast, there's a guy who makes custom belts, West Coast Design,
Uh-huh.
and I'm always so itchy to just like slap the money down and make my own custom like title, but I think one day I will. But yeah, I'm like really itchy to do the title thing. So um,
Yeah, for me, like when I got into that was the first thing I started collecting was wrestling belts,
hmm,
and it was through a friend that he got me into it. Where when I met him, I was only watching wrestling. That was it. Like I wasn't collecting anything.
hmm.
And then he was like, "Hey, you need to come over." He's like, "Hey, do you want to come over to my house or whatever?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I went over just to hang out. And when I walked in, he has like this big display of like different titles from like WCW, WWF, WWF, like back in the day, all the way to like current.
That's
So
awesome.
when I looked at his collection, I think he's like over 100 belts, right? So imagine you walking into this place is like to me, I saw, and then you look at his room because he has it in his bedroom too. So I'm just like, what the fuck is this? And he's just like, oh, these are like all my titles. And I was like, you collect all of these? And like, this is what way before I started collecting anything. He was like, yeah. He was like, well, I was like, well, where do you get these? So then he sat down with me and he told me about all this stuff and I got hooked. So then I just started buying belts or I started like trading things that I had to get belts or whatever in case they be. And then a year went by and I had like maybe like 10 to 12 belts already. But then it gets very expensive though.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, ring gear so far has gotten really expensive, and I'm cutting back on things because it's like I would hear stories like it's hard to get these things, and a lot of people won't answer your messages. But for so I don't know what it is. All the people that I like to talk to, they've all hit me back, and it was like, yeah, I have something, or yeah, I could work something out with you, and I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. So now people are just like, well, how do you get all this stuff so fast? And I'm just like, I don't know. It just made a lot of connections with people,
Yeah.
especially doing the Instagram page and then and doing these interviews and stuff like that. I start to connect with different people and it just kind of just like falls into my lap at times. But yeah, but if you're gonna get into like belt collecting, by all means, if you're gonna get your own like custom belt, just look out for like subtle things, like depending on like how do you want the plate? Do you want it thin? Do you want it thick?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you want the leather? Do you want it to be like the way it is on TV, or do you want it stiff? It's just so much stuff that goes into it. There's like you'll look back and you're like, okay, you need somebody who's like a real expert in that to do it. So, but if you have questions, by all means, you let me know, and I'll sit down with you and be like, hey, if you're gonna get a belt, make sure it's like X, Y, and Z, where you'll be really happy with it,
Oh,
depending
for
on like your
sure.
budget.
Like if I get one designed up, I'll definitely go for some advice because it's kind of tedious because it's a lot of dough to throw down like for a custom title.
Yeah,
So definitely want to be sure and careful and get the most eyes on it that I can before making the final say. But that's probably going to be maybe a little bit down the road anyway.
yeah.
I do
So,
have like I do collect like those replica toy titles. I've been all over them lately,
yeah.
just from like the eras that I really liked. Like I really enjoyed the 2000 era, or
Hmm.
2002, 2004 era, like the first start of the brand split. So I like all
Yeah,
those, like the Intercontinental title that was like the round one, and then like all the different tag titles. So and the cruiserweight title at that time too. So I do have like a little collection of all the toy replica titles, and the new Mattel ones are actually pretty slick too.
oh yeah, I love the new ones. I just like the one thing I could say about like the new Mattel ones is like sometimes if you look at it, when they started doing the titles, especially they'll start like cutting back on things. So people will like nitpick it and be like, oh, this is like I bought I had the Chris Jericho a little bit bubbly
Hmm.
um action figure, and then when I opened it, someone told me, hey, did you look at the belt? And I was like, yeah, I looked at the belt. They was like, no, no, no. Did you really look at the belt? And I had to open it back up again. And but sure enough, the thing is flipped. It's backwards.
Oh, yours was?
A lot of people were. I don't
Uh,
know if it was just like a batch that just went out. There was just like, flipped around the first batch around, but
I think so, because I was like definitely like a second or third batcher,
uh,
and the one I got was all cleared up by then. Yeah, but I know a
you
lot,
lucky.
seen a lot of pictures of that too, of them, the belt being flipped around.
Yeah, so I kept mine. So people was just like, hey, like you might as well. And when people tell you like, hey, if you want to sell it, like you let me know. I'm like, nah, buddy.
Yeah,
Like, nah, I'm gonna keep it because now I
that's
know it's probably gonna be worth something down the line.
and pretty cool to have. Like just like the like Jim Ross War Tony, like instead of War Zone, it was War Tony on his shirt, like one of those
Yes.
like random epic mess ups, you know.
Oh my god. So what else are you currently collecting besides
Really,
wrestling?
other than wrestling, really, it's nothing. Like, because all my stuff is either somehow wrestling related, whether it's podcasts or video games or. But I do collect a lot of stuff for my daughter. Like,
Yeah.
I got into like doing we got her a bunch of Muppet Babies.
Oh,
So we
nice.
got a bunch of Muppet Babies, a whole set of them, two sets of them actually, and then and now my daughter's really into PJ Masks, so getting a
Oh my
whole bunch of
god.
PJ Masks stuff.
Don't get me started with PJ Masks. I have two young boys, and when PJ Masks first started to hit TV, and they started to go to like Target and Toys R Us when Toys R Us was still around at the time, it was like we were going. Me and my wife, we were going to Toys R Us maybe like twice out the week to pick up stuff. And the only thing I would tell you is like don't let her watch Blaze and the Monster Machine because they're worse than Mattel. Like, yeah,
Uh,
like they come out with like you see Mattel when we have like the elites, they'll come up with six elites and like one like collector's edition, right?
oh yeah.
So imagine that, but imagine having 10 cars from like two episodes. They'll make every single car and put it out there. So now you as a parent, you're thinking in your mind, especially you're a collector, you'll be like, well, my daughter needs this one. And oh look, Blaze has like a different color on this one. So she's definitely gonna need that one because now she's gonna see it and she's gonna want it. So yeah, but my kids outgrew the Blaze, but
Hmm.
my son is 8 and he still was like, oh look, PJ Mask. And that's because it was funny you mentioned that because he did mention that like last week where he was like, hey, look, they have a new PJ Mask. And I was like, no. Like like
Yeah.
I just bought you wrestling figures and like freaking Fortnite stuff, and now you want this too? Like, no.
And I'm almost positive they like put certain ones at like certain stores because I could always find like a Catboy. He's always there, but Owlette,
Uh-huh.
like you know where to be found. Like I always have to go online to go find her or something for my daughter.
Oh my god, yeah. I think the hardest thing that I tried to look for the last time was like the vehicle that holds like all of them together.
Oh, yep, yep, yep.
Yeah, it took me about 4 stores before I actually found it, and I called my wife and I was like, I got it. She was like, oh, thank God. It was worse than getting a PS5.
Yeah, the one because we were she was getting real into it right before the holidays, so I could piece together like the motorcycle edition, but I couldn't find like the car edition, and like I think we got a mixed match a little bit, but they all work together. They're all universal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm not gonna take up too much of your time. If you want to plug anything that you're working on right now, well, where can we find you on socials? The
Uh,
floor is yours.
Gotcha, right on. So on Twitter, Instagram, I'm that Matt Carlos. If you hop over to my Facebook page, it's the Hidden Gem Matt Carlos. Also, the couple of the companies that I work for recent around this area to look out for: All Pro Wrestling out of the San Francisco area, and Hood Slam out of Oakland. I'm sure when things start kicking up again, look out for these guys. But yeah, that's all my stuff, and that's it.
All right, man. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll definitely keep looking out for you out here as soon as things start to open up.
Right on. Thanks, Kenny. I appreciate it, man.
All right.